making whatever this is? Why is whatever this is in production?
Hi, it's me, Vicky. In the modern-day library of beautiful anime men, one stands heads and shoulders above the rest, for throughout heaven and earth, Gojo Satoru is the breedable one. I have seen this man more than my own parents at this rate, but can you blame Mappa? Gojo Satoru is a recent addition to the long legacy of pretty boys that have graced anime since its early inception at the hands of Osamu Tezuka. Yes, Jujutsu Kaisen is immensely popular. Yes, of course it's popular among boys, it's a battle shonen. I wasn't born yesterday, according to this comment at least. But you'd be stupid to think it's only guys who enjoy Jujutsu Kaisen, especially if you spent any time in the comments section of a Gojo post. And if the comments are anything to go off of, Gojo is so genetically blessed you'd think his parents were a petri dish and an issue of GQ, heir to the prestigious Gojo clan, a bloodline blessed by the six eyes and limitless techniques. Gojo can quite literally fold the fabric of time and space like a quesadilla, and he'll always have cursed energy in his reserves. These magical eyes even act as a cursed energy X-ray, allowing Gojo to perceive anything and everything containing cursed energy with the visual acuity of a hawk. And if his powers alone don't make him a Mary Sue, there's his looks. Having a propensity to act like a bratty child with the nuclear codes who isn't afraid to press the button, Gojo is a very entertaining character to watch. Superpowers are great, and there's no better currency than clout, but having a cute smile makes for good advertising. And women and men alike are eating from the same bowl in this case. Not too surprising if we also consider how female-identifying individuals make up half of the demographic for North American con attendees. Titles by the likes of Gundam Wing and Saint Seiya are paragons of the beautiful men doing amazing things formula, and though they were originally titles aimed at a male audience, female fans were quick to make up for a large portion of the demographic. So yeah, nothing new. And can you blame them? What sane person would turn down pretty boys with superpowers and a chip on their shoulder? Young men with lithe bodies, round eyes with effeminate lashes, big hair and blushing cheeks, a marked difference from the beefy Terminator-styled men that dominated the pages of Shonen Jump in the 80s and 90s. If you're someone with eyes? You can see that the heroes of shonen titles are these big, strapping men with bulging muscles, sharp hunter eyes, looking like a looks-maxing dream out here. There's no negative cantil tilt to be found. Like a carrot under a box held up by a stick, Gojo was designed to be a tasty snack to cater to the average female and male anime fan by making him an overpowered Bishonen character. Two qualities that I believe appeal to straight men and women. Even though Gojo fever has proven more contagious than the flu, there is a fine balance drawn between creating the pretty package of shoujo dreams with the incomprehensible superpowers only found possible in shonen anime. How else will Fuzz Feet Studios shake you down for doubloons every time they drop new Gojo cock? Of course, I think Gojo's the kind of pretty that sexual attraction has no influence on, but we'll be focusing on the heterosexual men and women because this video is already too long. Nothing against the NB clan, it's just that these genres tend to be extremely gendered and delineated between men and women. We got a lot of ground to cover, ranging from Gojo's writing to character design, so let's get started. Jujutsu Kaisen is a 2018 shonen battle manga turned 2020 anime with as much kick punch as the next red-blooded action flick. And like the average shonen battle manga, fists are the language of debate and the best fighter emerges on top. I mean, if the action flicks actually had PhD level exposition dumps that chip away at my reading comprehension level, I'm here for a good time, not terms and conditions on how my curse technique reaches maximum strength in the parking lot of a Denny's at 3 AM. 10 out of 10. We'll bring this up to my therapist. And like British people, when they see a plank of sawdust with a side of asbestos, people ate this shit up. We got cheap figures, tiny figures, slutty figures, expensive figures, movies, skyrocketing manga sales, live events, collabs, t-shirts, cosplay, a buffet necessary for any popular anime. And when we take into account how popular of a demographic shonen is, especially battle shonen action, JJK is a title operating on an already successful formula. So for what is a popular anime, why don't we take a look at the popularity poll. Now, if you're not familiar with the concept of popularity polls, they're basically an opportunity offered by these manga publications for people to vote for their favorite characters. And not to say that this is the end-all and be-all of assessing an audience's reception of a character, especially if we take into account how different regions have different fan bases that will react differently to a given character, but rather a useful tool for helping us paint a larger picture about how people really feel about a character when used in conjunction with other things such as merchandise sales. So as we can see from this handful of popularity polls, without fail, Gojo will always be in the top 3. Yeah, no shit, that's why we're here today. With the way Gojo Satoru is mentioned in tandem with JJK, you'd think he's the main character, an occurrence that is so frequent it's almost acknowledged as fact by fans. When we look at the diversity and sheer quantity of Gojo's merchandise in comparison to Megumi and Yuji, I'd argue there's a slight preference for Gojo. I pulled a couple results from AmiAmi, a major retailer for anime-related goods, and Gojo has the typical figures, keychains, all of the above, but more. Towels, acrylic stands, homosexuality, phone charms, plushies, more homosexuality, pens, cups, prison, lockets, buttons, a two-piece with a side of gay, clear sheets, magnets. The CIA wishes they worked with the same efficiency as Gojo's PR team because they've created an army of Manchurian candidates with this clip alone. Gojo lands squarely in the intersection of shoujo and shonen, easily appealing to the ladies who want a pretty face with a great personality and for the boys who want a tank that can bulldoze an army. When we look at some of the most popular battle shonen characters, for example, like, Luffy, Tanjiro, and Izuku, they tend to appeal more to a male audience rather than female. This comes down to the male power fantasy, a dream sold to primarily young boys that tells them how hard work, determination, and friendship can get them through any and every struggle. And, key blasting school, don't lie to me. It wasn't so much that these male fans wanted to be with these characters, but rather be them, since they're the ones who get to go on adventures, fight bad guys, get the girl. But in the case of JJK, female fans wish they were that girl if Gojo's involved. Male fandom for a battle shonen anime is a lot like being a sports fan, if you think about it. Defined by Daniel Wan, professor of psychology at Murray State University, as the extent to which a fan feels a psychological connection to a team and the team's performances are viewed as self-relevant. Competitions and games in battle shonen anime take on the form of fights between characters trying to prove who's the strongest, a similar discussion that could be found on the fields of the NFL. This sort of fandom is predominantly occupied by men, but share identical traits of worship with their female counterparts. Gender and Fandom by Kaya Mendelsohn, for example, discusses the delineation of female and male fandom spaces at the hands of society-wide gender biases. One Direction's fandom, for example, is assumed to be made up of only screaming adolescent girls obsessed with the band's good looks more than their musical talents, which isn't far off when compared to Gojo fangirls, but stay with me. They'd erect a bubblegum shrine in honor of Gojo's beauty if they could, so they've made polluting their digital footprint their favorite pastime instead. Sports fandoms, on the other hand, celebrate the masculine conquest of muscular bodies slamming into each other with a line of cheerleaders in skimpy uniform. Though the objects of adoration couldn't be more unlike, they're pursued with the same vigor of both fan bases. Having a favorite sports team, rooting for them from the bleachers, and owning sports memorabilia fosters a sense of community similar to that of voting for your favorite One Direction member, and buying t-shirts with their face plastered all over it from Hot Topic, hence the two genders, One Direction or the NFL. Traditionally, the mainstream's perception of fandom activities involve women covertly, exchanging pictures of their pookie wookie under the table, but Gojo is the cake that all love to partake in. Whereas Gojo fangirls would create and distribute content glorifying Gojo's good looks and personality, Gojo fanboys spark discussions about the likelihood of Gojo taking Sukuna out by the kneecaps. According to Mendelsohn, those who identify as female tend to gravitate towards marginalized fandom spaces, while those who identify as male are more interested in mainstream spaces. It's like how you tend to see more female-identifying individuals engaging in fandom pastimes like shipping, fanfic writing, drawing, fan art, or cosplay. Inversely, male-identifying individuals are more interested in the acquisition and execution of canon facts, meta-discussion, and data visualization, as we have seen from age-old power scaling discussion. This reminds me of a forum post that I saw in passing, but it perfectly described it as women create and men curate, and the non-binary levitate. Works such as My Happy Marriage and Apothecary's Diaries feature the beautiful men that women flock to, men who have the angelic looks and emotional range not present in the average shonen powerhouse. Their love interests are treated as their priorities, and their strengths lie not in how they can put a crater in the earth, but how they can dissect their emotional inner workings of their partner, and say the right things at the right time. And even if they don't, it's treated as its own type of shonen battle that allows them the chance to improve. Also, it's just funny. I'm here to tell you that Gojo isn't quite that. Gojo just happens to be exceptionally good at doing it all.
Urahime? You crying?
When we think of the traditional anime mentor, we picture a gruff old man, a seasoned veteran in the art of violence, and in some cases we may even get a gruff old woman instead. Beating ass doesn't care about gender. Sometimes we'll get a beleaguered man who doesn't acknowledge the existence of sleep and is now charged with the burden of teaching the next generation. And don't forget the pervert idiot savants, the ones who seem more preoccupied with a girl's panties than giving their student the tools to save the world. No matter the mentor, all are veritable expert fighters with unique abilities and valuable techniques that are essential to the development of the protagonist. However, shonen battle anime mentors aren't always designed to be eye candy. Usually that duty falls on the shoulders of the main character's love interest. So when Gojo struts his shoujo legs on stage with this cocky little grin, it's giving more shoujo say love interest, rather than a professor with a PhD in jumping. Seemingly nonchalant, careless, and sometimes outright irresponsible, Gojo's teaching style serves as comical entertainment and exposition on JJK's combat system, and eventually Gojo would also serve as an example of what peak jujutsu sorcery looks like. This is made apparent from his first fight with Sukuna, but where Gojo really commanded the attention of every viewer was his first fight with Jogo.
Whoa. What? Is he about to take it off? Oh, hell yeah. All right, I'm ready.
Sure, he's collapsing the physical walls of space, but everyone loses their shit because he has pretty eyes. And you know what? Pull up a toilet for me too. Gojo is unfathomably beautiful. His jaw comes to an angular point, his chin curved with a gentle taper. He has what we call a heart-shaped face, and people with these proportions tend to have angular cheekbones and sharp chins with a pretty wide forehead. Personally, I've noticed that a lot of anime characters seem to have heart-shaped faces, and I think that has to do with how they're considered the quote-unquote most attractive. Anime can't escape the clutches of beauty standards, so looking as slender as possible adds to Gojo's model physique. He's more of a model who got lost on his way to the runway, sticking out like a sore thumb with his blindfold, slender yet toned body, white hair, and a towering height of 6'3", or 190 centimeters for my metric system bitches. His overall color scheme is mostly monochromatic, save for the jewel tones of blue and purple. Black and white make for nice contrasting colors, as one is the absence of light and the other an abundance. That, and Gojo's dark purple uniform tends to go nicely with his hair while also matching the sapphire tones. And then there's his black blindfold, the accessory that I believe is Gojo's most defining feature. And I know what you're thinking, the blindfold isn't just for show, because maintaining limitless and 6 eyes is exhausting and exerts a great deal of pressure onto the user. So Gojo has to cover his eyes like he's nursing a fat hangover. Sometimes he'll switch it up with black glasses when he's in the mood to look like a B-list celebrity. He models lip balm, obviously. When his hair isn't held up by his blindfold though, it's sitting on his head like a dandelion plume. It fans out into these soft spikes that rest gently on his ears. Even though this hairstyle is the default for many battle shonen characters, Gojo's has a more manicured look with the way it is rendered with curved lines. It feels almost wrong to see him in JJK, really, because Gojo should be admired from across the classroom by the heroine of a shoujo romance, made for shoujo, doomed to shonen type shit. There was also an effort to depict Gojo's hair as less opaque, and more like a cool toned gradient, as we can see from the gradation from purple to blue. Gojo is one of God's favorites because he has these stupidly long white lashes that frame his blue eyes, a move that was done to give him a bit of a sultry edge while also helping him appear like a delicate wisp. Therefore, with his arresting appearance, Gojo falls under the popular anime archetype of the white-haired pretty boy. And although I don't have any scholarly sources to share for this one, there is a long legacy to work with. The white-haired pretty boy, although not exclusive to anime, is a prevalent design trope. Since there is a level of mystery ascribed to the white-haired pretty boy, giving him these mythical good looks helps to emphasize his angelic visage. So as a result, the white-haired pretty boy is also often introduced as a prophetic figure shrouded in mystery, sometimes as a prelude to great disaster. Or he's just destined to tickle the main character's prostate. Regardless, this appearance brings up questions about the character's origins, which is typically supernatural with a side of OP powers and homosexuality. As a result, some aspects of the white-haired pretty boy fall under the Bishonen trope. In the words of Nikolai Sfectu of Animation and Cartoons, Bishonen is a Japanese term literally meaning beautiful youth. Bishonen contains the prefix bi, meaning beautiful, when in reference to woman, but the object of beauty in the case of Bishonen is meant to describe a young man who whose beauty and sexual appeal transcends the boundary of sex. Borrowing heavily from the moe, blob, doe-eyed aesthetics of shoujo manga and anime, the shonen adds its own twist by adding a sharpened masculine quality, kind of like a homunculus of shoujo and shonen preferences. But shonen characters lean more towards feeding the female gaze, and are the objects of lust and affection among female fans. It's like taking a razor to a brick of clay and shaving the curves to a point. These beautiful men are paragons of grace, intelligence, class, and charisma, a personality just as immaculate as their looks. For the ladies who prefer a flower to a rock, the shonen men capture the girlhood fantasy of marrying the prince, or some version of the owner class. As a result, you'll frequently find these types of character designs in Japanese media catered towards straight women, such as otome games, shoujo romance titles, and yaoi or boys love titles, or mecha titles. Why is this so common? If the white-haired pretty boy comes pre-packaged with a pair of red eyes, they're most likely a villain, but a very cute villain. It's important to note that this may draw inspiration from the supposed Roman belief that red and white represent present or imminent death. Blood and bone, primal elements of the human body, are often exposed or visible in the event of violence, which probably created that association with death. But don't worry though, if their eyes are blue, they're usually a dick. Blue and white create this frosty combo, and their respective meanings have to do with purity, sorrow, holiness, or serenity. In comparison to red eyes, blue eyes come off as more cool and non-threatening, even if it lacks the same vibrancy and life as their counterpart. It's the tried and true interplay between cold and hot. Typically, blue eyes in anime are just that. But in the case of Gojo, his eyes are detailed with light rays and swaths of blue to mimic a flowing galaxy. Sometimes even the sky can be seen in his eyes, possibly a metaphor for the latter, or as a testament to how pure and reflective his eyes are. It tells a story of unspeakable power flowing through Gojo, likening him more to a god than a human, a quality that Gojo is very well aware of. And it all starts with baby Gojo. I like to describe younger Gojo as looking more wild and untamed compared to his adult counterpart, and most of that comes down to his posing and shape language. Adult Gojo's uniform, for example, is less tailored and more loose-fitting, to kind of give him a relaxed feel, whereas young Gojo's Jujutsu Tech uniform jacket is cropped and fitted perfectly to his torso. His pants also have a cigarette cut, or a straight leg with a slim taper that hugs the body more. It makes young Gojo's body look comparatively smaller than adult Gojo, even though he's pretty tall for his age. By that virtue, it plays up that this is a youthful version of Gojo that we're spending time with, leaning further into the color theme of blue as it represents blue spring, or the idea that youth is the best time in a person's life. The part of young Gojo that seems to communicate this the most, in my opinion, is his hair. It separates into these soft, upright spikes that are closer to the gelled-up shonen protagonist. He even stands with a saucy little leg spread and open palms. Baby Gojo wore his heart on his sleeve, a trait made more noticeable by the fact that he's wearing dark, circular glasses. As his power had not yet reached its peak, he was able to get away with suppressing the side effects of Limitless and the Six Eyes by wearing blacked-out sunglasses. Personally, I think that the glasses give us more of a window into his personality, especially whenever they slide down on the bridge of his nose. And that really helps to capture the comparative naivete between younger Gojo and older Gojo, but I think what also perfectly captures it is older Gojo's posing. For example, when we look at the official illustrations of older Gojo, we can see him doing the hand gesture for his domain expansion. Looking at the timeline, this is a power that young Gojo would not have had access to until later into his jujutsu career. But to this day, when he smiles, he smirks, and when he quips, it's without shame, and he throws around the title of being the strongest modern jujutsu sorcerer with the same finesse as he does hollow purples. The man literally let his adopted son get beaten around like a ragdoll for some freaking sweets, be for real. Gojo is a walking case of gap moe. By the rules of gap moe, Gojo's pretty face is a distraction from whatever mess is coming out of his mouth. Gap moe, per the sacred text, is Japanese for don't judge a book by its cover. Oftentimes, when we see a person with glasses, we assume they're studious bookworm, until we see their yaoi collection. Personally, I like to think of gap moe as being like a Kinder Surprise egg. The trope is at its strongest when you're not expecting anything outside of whatever the character design is already telling you. Because when we do look at Gojo's design on the surface, we're led to think he's the white-haired pretty boy we just discussed, or the cool aloof guy who keeps his cards close to his chest. Gojo's blindfold even acts as a cover that obscures the most expressive features of his face, making it more difficult to get a read on his emotions. His smile is the one thing that hints at any trace of gap moe with how mischievous it comes off. Gojo's inner child does most of the talking, and it desires sweets, taunting Nanami, cross-dressing to make his students laugh, and leaving Megumi in a life or death situation for dessert. never letting it go. And this energy is carried into his interactions with Yuji, who Gojo dotes on like an affectionate older brother. It's a vibe he even carries into his day-to-day operations with the higher-ups, acting as flippantly as he would like. The explosive and goofy quips that flow out of Gojo's mouth sound more like something that would come from a guy drenched in bright colors with a silly wide smile. Like, you know, a guy like Ryuji from P5. Gojo is a lesson on pretty privilege because only a man with lips like that can get away with running his mouth. And when destiny is digging its grips into your shoulders, it's really hard to develop any meaningful relationships as a child. He had to grow up from an early age, like straight out of the womb early, as established in the Hidden Inventory arc. Gojo seems to perceive this as a curse of his own, a curse that has left him isolated on less of a pedestal and more of a cage. To a certain degree, this corrupts Gojo and paves the way to an unhinged quality to him. Going back to how he killed like 1,000 curses under 299 seconds, we're also treated to the sight of a nearly unshackled Gojo taking off his leg weights. He grins, almost cackles gleefully at the sight of Hanami being absolutely eviscerated by his aura alone. And then there's that moment where Gojo becomes a bloodthirsty predator who looks into Jogo's eyes while tastefully rubbing his cock on the same arm he's playfully threatening to tear. He's a racehorse tearing out of the stables, tearing up the track and pounding the earth into subatomic particles. And while the guys are tearing down the finish line with their eyes, Gojo's groupies are clutching their pearls and fainting in their seat.
Clutch the pearls, what a sneaky thing to do.
The Bishonen powerhouse comes in yandere. Is there anything Queen can't do? The Gap Moe keeps going, it's leaking his drama and giving neon blue eyes. Therefore, he didn't really make any friends until Shoko and Geto came along. Especially Geto.
Are you Gojo Satoru because you're the most breedable? Or are you the most breedable because you're Gojo Satoru?
This is a video essay of its own, but I'm of the belief that a male character's market value is increased when he's part of a popular MLM ship. MLM ships, on average, appeal more to heterosexual women with a little sprinkle of something for the boys. We call them fudanchi, and as everyone here knows, there's nothing quite like the love a woman has for their favorite fictional character. Now, when said character has Chernobyl levels of chemistry with another attractive man, you can stop there. I'm sold. Here's the D to my ass. I like to say that if you're attracted to men and your OTP is made up of 2 men, then you likely are attracted to both of them, or you're projecting yourself onto one of them. Now, I won't criticize how you have fun, but I will say that this only further increased Gojo's reach because it sold another level of fantasy to his fans. He wasn't the only racehorse of choice for shonen battle discussions, of course, but the one half of a ship with over 13,000 works on AO3 and a hashtag with over 20,000 followers on Tumblr. Gojo's face wasn't only on solo merchandise, but nearly anything and everything featuring Geto. This extends to fan merchandise, which is a whole other world to jump into. It's like the diversification of your stock portfolio, but for fandoms. Yes, that's what I'm settling on. Gojo can be a nuclear twink and the guy who gets dumped outside of a KFC. Gojo fulfills his half of this couple with flying colors because he balances out Geto's serenity with his haughty arrogance. Their dynamic became the muse for an endless abundance of fan content immortalizing their blue spring. And I don't think there's any better historical archival than a picture of your butt cheeks spread wide open while you're getting jackhammered by a fat cock. Something to be loved for more than what you can do, and for what you are. Gojo isn't seen as Gojo, as the head of the Gojo clan, a pair of fancy eyes, nothing more, nothing less. I would go as far as to say that when Suguru looks at him, it's a reflection of the admiration Gojo's fans have for him too. I'm compelled to think that Gojo's psyche fills in the gaps left by his character design while offering a complex and playful side that appeals to certain female fans. And I'm sure the boys love a handsome guy as much as the rest of us, but nothing will ever be as important as watching Gojo blowing out more than Geto's back.
I'm saying I'm actually shocked you would ever have thought you could beat me with this loser shit.
If crawling out of my mama's pussy changed the power paradigm of the Jujutsu world, I'd walk like I got the biggest dick too. And you'd be lying if you said you wouldn't. Though brief, we were treated to a glimpse of Gojo's powers when he clapped Sukuna, who we're told is the king of curses, in episode 2 of Jujutsu Kaisen. Immediately, we're aware Gojo isn't someone to sneeze at, and that is again backed up by his fight with Jogo. But as most of us know, that was only a small drop in the bucket of Gojo's potential. Now let's go back to hidden inventory when Gojo was a baby twink. Even in his infancy, Gojo was a monstrous force to be reckoned with, although he was more like an exposed wire than a surge-protected power outlet. The first example of this being demonstrated when he realized there was a way for him to turn on Limitless 24/7. But this instance also serves as a form of foreshadowing because it reveals a chip in his armor which later leads to his first major loss against this deadbeat dad. Gojo is immediately likened to a phoenix as he revives himself from this major loss and adds reverse curse technique to his repertoire. And that's when we really start to see the evolution of Gojo from just a regular promising sorcerer to a near god. The celebration of violence and strength in battle shonen manga can be traced back to the tenets of Bushido. That's described as a code of honor among samurai. The ideal warrior was expected to lead the virtuous life of an honored citizen with the peaceful conduct of a monk. Although the values have metamorphosized due to Buddhist and Confucius influence, what remains consistent is strength as the most valuable indicator of true manhood. Though the modern day expectation of Japanese men is for them to be the domineering masters of their households, the expectations of the traditional man is more in line with the life of a samurai. I'm gonna fuck up this name, so bear with me, but Endo Rukmini Wayunichas, I'm so sorry, expands on Bushido's presence in shonen anime through One Piece. Although they mostly focus on the representation of Bushido through Zoro's values, much of what Wayunichas had discussed can be found in other shonen works like JJK. These qualities of Bushido aid in creating the ideal hero as it instills a number of positive masculine traits to the character. However, I would argue that Gojo only represents certain and not all Bushido traits. For one thing, I can't say Gojo is completely honorable when considering how he acts as a self-involved free agent in the face of his family and Jujutsu Tech's institution. However, I also can't ignore how he honored Toji's dying words by taking Megumi under his wing. Gojo definitely has balls to get dumped in front of the KFC. He'd tear the world asunder for his students and close friends, and he's undoubtedly powerful. But it's his lack of social decorum, or more like disrespect for it, and confidence that makes him, for a lack of a better term, cool. Gojo shirks most of the unspoken values of the shonen protagonist, so I can't help but think of how easy it is for him to be a villain if given the chance. But isn't that part of the fun? Isn't it interesting to see a character dangling off the edge of iniquity, but the only thing keeping them from free falling into sin is the firm hand of their other half? Oh wait, wrong topic.
Huh? Is that a fucking table? Who is that?
Throughout the course of JJK, questions would surface as to whether Gojo or Sukuna was the strongest sorcerer, and per Battle Shonen Destiny, shonen fanboys would flock to places like Twitter to create peer-reviewed research with 10 different citations on how Gojo or Sukuna would win. Both characters have demonstrated the extent of their powers multiple times throughout the series. Spoiler warnings for the next part, because this is where we start to get into territory that most anime-onlys haven't gone to, and in most cases I would drop a timestamp or something for you guys to come back to, but since this is a really important part of Gojo's story, I would recommend that you give chapter 236 a read if you really want to be clued into what the video is going to be discussing from here on. So if you just want to drop the video here, no hard feelings. For almost 100 chapters, thus causing an unmistakable paradigm shift within the Jujutsu world, much like when Gojo was first born. An almost literal timer would start counting down the days to when Gojo would be unsealed, and eventually, that day would come in chapter 221, and what Gojo immediately begins to do is go for Sukuna. Gojo had just been released from Thought Boy prison a la the prison realm, so he was ready to take back his title as JJK's best breed mare. So began the Shinjuku Showdown arc, and people were gagged. Keeping up with this fight on a weekly basis was not only thrilling, but anxiety-inducing. I think my orthodontist hates this chapter in particular because my teeth were ground down to the gums, and so was the rest of the online anime community. Gojo fanboys thought this was easy. After all, Gojo kept saying he was the strongest. He never backed down from a fight, so he isn't going to lose now. Which is why, when chapter 236 came along and Gojo's body lay desecrated, his bloodied legs still standing as if he was preparing to declare victory, to say people were shocked would be putting it lightly. Gojo has proven that he is the pinnacle of jujutsu sorcery, and is arguably the only thing tipping the scale in favor of the institution, a role that he begrudgingly accepts to also further his goals of raising the next generation of powerful sorcerers. But Chapter 236 would drop at the same time while Season 2 aired, and anime-onlys were given a taste of how much damage a low-powered Sukuna could inflict. He leveled Shibuya and made concrete rain from the skies, sure, but Gojo is the strongest. Gojo's stock doesn't appreciate, the market stays bullish. Gojo was the winning horse at the Kentucky Derby until he wasn't. Revisionist agendas cropped up among fans in disbelief that somehow their golden boy lost. The common consensus among Gojo's fan club being that Sukuna won by plot armor and Mahoraga. Disbelief evolved into mania, and a literal memorial popped up at a Chile subway. Jesus Christ, your days are numbered. Accounts dedicated to counting down the days of white-haired boy toy Jesus' return popped up like weeds. Redditors attempted to rearrange the stars with thesis-worthy explanations on how a Gojo flop was scientifically impossible. I noticed that both sides of Gojo's fandom began to coalesce here. Despite the somewhat antagonistic relationship, they had the same priority. Okay, second priority, but what was truly at the top of the list was keeping the light on when their boy inevitably comes back home. Though the flame has died down, some have been deluded into thinking Gojo's homecoming is only a matter of time. I don't know what to tell you. But we all need hobbies. Before Chapter 236, the typical interaction between female and male JJK fans was playfully antagonistic. Twitter became a sort of watering hole where all Gojo fans would sip from the day's newest Gojo revival theory. My favorite coping mechanism is probably the one that references the structure of Buddha's path to enlightenment as Gojo's preferred revival method. There's also the more reasonable theory that Mappa wouldn't throw away their moneymaker like that, so it's only a matter of time. But then you remember that this is the mangaka. No one ever said delusion was a straight path. People will hold on to any breadcrumbs regardless of how insubstantial. Volume cover here, a Bobo reference there. Regardless of whether or not you think our blue-eyed king is coming back, you're goofy if you ignore the impact Gojo's death left in popular culture. Gojo isn't a strange face of some obscure title that only bedroom goblin otakus are familiar with. He is the face of 2020's anime, whether or not you like it. And I can't help but think of Aerith's death, which, spoilers for a game that's older than some of my audience, she dies. People refused her death in droves. The loss of their only healer and the best representation of the game's themes hurt. She has to come back. There's no way, not if the fans had anything to say about it. But as the story goes on, and Aerith stays buried in the waters of the City of the Ancients, reality settles in, almost as fast as a delusion. The demand for Aerith's death to be revised was thunderous. Nothing was going to change, of course, so now Aerith's death became the most memorable part about FF7. I'm not saying that's what's happening with JJK currently, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the top 3 things people discuss when they look back on JJK. That aside, people reacted this way because they loved Aerith, the fact remaining true after decades. So it's interesting to see the same play out with Gojo as it's happening in real time. We talk a lot about parasocial relationships in this age of social media, but I think that we often leave out fictional characters from this conversation. Obviously, they can't engage with us like actual people can, unless Christian was right this whole time and there's a dimensional merge waiting to happen. But the worldwide grief for Gojo has only one competitor, and no, I'm not thinking about the queen. Becoming the mascot or rep of a property is already difficult as the main character. You have the Herculean task of your show picking up traction, the equally Herculean task of creating a lasting impression, and somehow selling merch when you're not busy drowning because you're trying to make a media empire. Gojo was not only the golden child or the best that Jujutsu Kaisen had to offer, but he was also the muse of so many different artists, writers, and musicians alike.
Ay, can't touch me like Gojo. Look good at all my photos.
Someone who wasn't just a joy to watch on screen, but someone who was also incredibly well written. Hidden Inventory wasn't only trying to sell more merch, but to also offer a window into Gojo's psyche, to understand who he is as a man and not a weapon. Something that I believe to be a feat in of itself, because typically when it comes to a lot of these shonen anime, I don't really think we spend enough time with the characters outside of how they can fight. So honestly, to be able to say that we witnessed the calm before the storm just helps add to Gojo's appeal. And although witnessing his lowest lows does make him seem a little bit less like a god, it's more or less the reason why we're here. But Gojo treated the 2D to deity pipeline like a skip in a puddle. I guess long legs have more than one purpose. The careful assemblage of time-tested tropes and good writing is what gave Gojo the edge he needed to dominate the anime merch market. People will love the trinkets that shine, the ones laden with jewels, but if the thing doesn't have an endearing quality to it, then it will eventually tarnish. It was just fortunate enough that Gojo also happened to be pretty, and he also happened to be stupid strong. Though only the level of grief is the same, I'm reminded of Aerith when I look back at how the audience exploded when Gojo died. Gojo's climb to stardom was made of steps dipped in the most beloved anime tropes. Ever so slowly, he became the thing that brought anime fandom together. So, to that end, I believe that is why everybody loves Gojo. Why are you still here? The door's right over there. I'm done. Just let me wither away. I'm tired. This video was supposed to drop earlier, much earlier, but I had to battle my crippling addiction to P3 reload first. So here we are. You're lucky this video even dropped, but maybe you hated it and you're regretting every minute you've lost, to which I say, comment down below. And maybe you love mediocrity. I don't know. Comment down below and subscribe. Let me know what other character designs you want me to analyze. If you're not familiar with my content, I get overly invested in the lives and exploits of people who don't know I exist. So if you like that sort of thing, check out my socials in the description below. And of course, stick around if you feel so inclined. As for what's up next, I'm thinking of something delicious. But if, of course, you guys have any other recommendations, drop them below in the comments. I was also thinking of eventually doing a breakdown of Avatar: The Last Airbender since I recently rewatched that, so that's up for debate, of course. And I would like to eventually dip my toes into Patreon, which I may or may not have set up before dropping this video. I don't know, take a look at my socials. Well, I've been me, Vicky. And that's it. See ya.